2 times. Thank you. Thank you. So, I was heartened to hear from several of you during the break that you do have the packet up on your Chromebook or your devices, so you know what pages I'm referencing. And I know that that came from an email that you folks have. So as we move into the 4th dimension, the 4th design point, that will be very helpful if you have the handout open. So, in terms of designing an environment, we talked about 3 design points thus far. Design point 1 is when we gather our facts about our learners. Design point 2 is differentiating content materials. Design point 3, differentiating products and assessment. And design point 4 is huge. It's about differentiating the processes of learning. And the processes of learning are the things we do to help students make sense of what they're learning. So when we think about that, there are at least 5 areas. So if you have the handout up, it would be numbered page 19. And on numbered page 19, it gives you a process differentiation menu that you could be thinking, what are some of these things I want to do for all of my students? What are some of these things that would be valuable for some? It includes the instructional formats, the instructional arrangements, the instructional strategies, the physical and the social environment, and our collaboration in teaching, be it co-teaching, adult to adult, adult to student, student with student. So if you're looking at page 19, you'll see that for each of those areas, there is a list of different techniques or strategies that apply. Let's take it apart a little bit. If we're thinking about the instructional format, we're thinking about our basic organizational design. Not every student learns from lecture. So there are various instructional formats that are going to work for students. Sometimes what we're providing them with are things that are more multisensory, it's active instruction, and this works very well for those who don't respond to the traditional lecture, demonstration, practice formats. In the packet you see here, we've got like flipped classroom, service learning, integrated cross-curricular thematic instruction, web-based learning, simulations, role plays, activities, etc. Which instructional formats are you going to use? The next column is about the instructional arrangements. That determines whether the students are going to work alone, with a partner, with a group. If they're in a group, is it a small group? Is it a large group? Is it a whole group? Some people, I believe, wrongly assume that if we're trying to differentiate instruction, that we really don't do much with large group instruction. You need the large group instruction at times because that's what creates the common conceptual understandings. And that's what builds a sense of community within a room. But a lot of our work does get carried out in other instructional arrangements. So I want to share with you a clip from a high school math teacher in Pennsylvania. And she's just briefly talking a little bit about instructional formats and instructional arrangements that she uses. This is Mandy. Talk to me a little bit about how you differentiate the process of learning.
In terms of how I set up with my lesson plan, I try to vary my instructional formats. So I have some kids working with technology and looking at videos and looking at what technology is available to them through graphing calculators, through online programs that are available so that even if they aren't here in school, they have access to the same opportunities at home. I also looked at using video segments so they can see the application and where, answering that age-old question, when am I ever going to use this, or when is this ever going to be used? So that's where the video came in.
Keep going.
The small groups, in terms of instructional arrangements, I try to keep my kids in small groups, but start them off with a whole group direction. This is where we're going, okay? This is what you're going to be working on. Get any questions that the whole group might have initially, because chances are that there's other kids with the same question, and then move into small groups, bring them back to whole group, and kind of vary that class structure. And then from there, the multiple intelligences that I spoke of earlier, we have some kids that are very artistically inclined. So start them off with a poster, get them started with something they're comfortable with. The kids with the interest in the surfing, start them off with a video on surfing so that is, it sparks their interest early. And the same thing with the kids that I started on the computer activity. They're very into technology, they like using technology and how can that be used to help them. So that's where I started them. So basically using their intelligence strengths as well to spark their interest early.
So just two easy, quick clips where she briefly talks about instructional format and instructional arrangement. Just talk to a partner. Did you pick up anything that she said in terms of how she might vary or differentiate either the format or the arrangement? Is she differentiating for different kids? How? To me, there's two important learnings in what she had to say. I'm curious what you picked up. Finish up that thought. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thank you. For me, well, let me back up and tell you a little bit about Mandy. So she works in this school in Pennsylvania that I worked with for a very long time. And she came to a summer training when she was new to the district, and it was a 2-day training in differentiation. And I kept looking at her because, you know, as a presenter, you're always kind of looking at your audience, and she had this furrowed brow a lot. But the afternoon of the second day, there was lots of time for people to work alone or with others to begin to develop unit plans for differentiation. So she was by herself, and I thought, oh good, I get a chance to really touch base with her. And I said, you know, how's it going and stuff? She said, I'm just trying to wrap my head around it. She said, because, you know, as a student, I went to Catholic school, and there wasn't much that went on in the way of things being differentiated. And when I first started teaching, I was teaching in a private school, and it was pretty much, you know, everybody was doing the same thing, same way, same rate. Those kids often came to us well prepared. But I wanted public school experience, and I read about this district, and I read that they were very inclusive, and they do a lot of co-teaching, they do a lot of differentiation. And so when I came for my interview, I knew what to say. But I really do believe in the back of my head, I kept thinking, they certainly aren't meaning high school math classes. But she said, the feedback I've got from my administration was, yeah, we do mean high school math classes. We want to see the differentiation, collaboration, and plan, and co-teaching. So that was a place where after training, you got to observe the people, as I was fortunate enough to do here for some of the folks. But we would observe 3 to 5 times, go in, and when I went in, after what she described, and I saw the first day, and by the way, she has more kids than the video shows, but when you go to film, if they don't bring a permission slip, you can't see those kids. So in any event, when I went in, she had set up all these different centers and stations, and I thought, wow, this is such a departure from her own experiences and what she's done. And then she said to the students, you can choose to go this, to this, to this, to this, and the vast majority of the students chose to work on problems out of the math book. And her shoulders just slumped, and I felt so sorry for her, because I'm like, she put all this work into this, you know? And when we were debriefing, she said, but Rich, I just never thought that's what they would choose to do, because they keep complaining, oh, these problems are boring, this is dumb. And I said, Mandy, I believe that it's hard to know that you would like to eat at a fancy French restaurant if you've only ever eaten at a McDonald's. So sometimes we do need to put choice in there, but we've got to have them experience things so it can become an informed choice. By the next time I came back to observe that class, those kids were moving in and out of all centers and stations. The two things I was hoping that you picked up on was that she starts them at the center or station, or learning the way that best matches their interests, talents, or strengths. But then she exercises non-strengths as she has them go around the room. And of course, she was relying upon, she had facts about the learners, she was relying upon that to determine where to start them. And certainly you saw that she did use multiple intelligences as one of the frameworks in her class. So, if we move to our third column, instructional strategies, this is the techniques that we use to help make the learning understood, so it can become automatic, and that knowledge will readily transfer into new situations. And so there are a variety of instructional strategies we can use. Some people try to expand their repertoire by incorporating multiple intelligences or the visual performing arts into what they're doing. But at the bottom, there are some names. How many of you are familiar with that name, Marzano? Yeah, I think he writes a book a week, right? I'm jealous. So Marzano, Pickering, and Pollock did a meta-analysis in 2001. They took all the research that existed about what is the impact of these various instructional strategies on student learning. And they came up with the 9 practices that were most highly correlated. That meta-analysis was done again in 2011. So you have all that old research plus a decade of new research. Interestingly enough, the same 9 practices came up again in the same order, same effect size. So they have written about it, but certainly some other authors have written about it as well. But if these are the 9 categories of instructional strategies we know that research says has the strongest impact on student learning, we should see them present in our instruction quite frequently. Let's just quickly review this. If you've got your handout, you would be going to page 20. And being a Letterman fan, I want to start at the bottom and work my way up, because I missed that. So, all 9 are highly correlated with raising achievement, but as you get to the top, the greater the correlation, 1 being most highly correlated. So strategy number 9, questioning at all levels of Bloom's taxonomy, combined with the use of advanced organizers. And we know advanced organizers are ways to help students understand what it is they're going to be learning and a way to organize that particular information. Sometimes it can be done verbally, but it's often done with graphic organizers. But it's making sure that we are looking, I get that nested blooms, and we're questioning the variety of ways up and down the levels of the hierarchy. Number 8, generating and testing hypotheses versus being told. What curricular area jumps into your head immediately when you say, where do we generate and test hypotheses? Science. Can we do it in other subject areas? Certainly. Number 7, setting clear objectives, letting your learners know, and providing specific feedback on their way. That one seems like, people do this. But you know, Doug Reeves and his colleagues went into 1,500 K-12 classrooms across the country, and they looked for the presence of basic effective instruction, such as posting, referencing the objectives. The educational researchers felt that in only 4% of the classrooms was the objective clear to them. I'm sure the teachers had objectives, but if it's not clear to an educational researcher, how clear is it to the students? I go to lots of schools where people post learning targets and/or objectives. Sometimes they're referenced, sometimes there aren't. I was in a wonderful 4th grade classroom recently in Illinois where they have their learning objectives, their language objectives. They even focused a bit on the learner qualities, the collaborative social skill objectives. They came back to them at least 3 times during the class asking the students, are you making progress toward this? How do you know? Where's your evidence? When used best, we see the objective posted, referenced, and a rationale solicited. Why is it important to learn this now and in the future? And what I think you need to add to it is the criteria of success. Today in this class, you will be successful if, at the end, you can say, do, whatever. I get to interview students. I often ask, what do you have to do to be successful in this class? What do you think I get as an answer? The most frequently occurring answer, what do you think it might be? Do what the teacher says, don't get in trouble. These two 8th grade girls said to me, oh, that's easy. You just look at the teacher and nod your head every once in a while. I want them to tell me what they have to do to be successful related to the objective. Number 6, cooperative group learning. There is no other instructional strategy in the history of the world that has as much research behind it as cooperative group learning. We have almost 700 major studies, multiple countries, diverse populations of learners. You can work independently, competitively, or cooperatively. But if we use cooperative group learning, we have higher achievement, increased retention, greater ability to take another person's perspective. We have better attitudes towards schools, towards teachers. We have access to psychological and social support. Students are on task more often, and they develop collaborative skills. How many of those research outcomes would be associated with what we want as goals of education? How many of those outcomes would lead to quality of life? Our problem is oftentimes that what we do in the name of cooperative group learning is not real cooperative group learning. In your packet, on page 21, I have this acronym, PIGSFACE, to remind us of the 5 critical elements of effective cooperative group learning. If you are interested in learning more about this, reflecting on how you use it currently, I would encourage you to go to my website and go to the topical area under presentations, cooperative group learning. There's a huge handout there, and at the end of it, there's a guided lesson plan tool. If you follow that, it will be impossible for you to develop a lesson that doesn't have all 5 critical elements in place. If one or more are missing, it's not cooperative group learning. The P in PIGSFACE is how the teacher creates that sense of we are in this together. We are positively interdependent. One for all and all for one. I can't succeed if you do not succeed. There are at least 9 different ways that teachers can build positive interdependence into a lesson. Sometimes that's simply having a common goal, but it's oftentimes jigsawing the information and material, having interconnected roles, a common incentive, etc. You don't have to have all 9 present, but the more that you have, the greater the interdependence. The number 1 criticism we hear of cooperative group learning is one child does all the work, everyone puts their name on it. That's not cooperative group learning. We hear that rather from teachers, from students, from parents. That teacher has failed to assure the presence of individual accountability. All students need to know what they will be held accountable for, when and how, before they begin their work. And we can differentiate what they're held accountable for. The G in PIGSFACE is about the group itself processing. Processing around their academic success, working on the task, but also their collaborative skills, their social skills. That can be done by giving them checklists. That can be done by you observing, collecting anecdotal data. Sometimes I used to have students be non-participant observers, so they were collecting data on how their fellow students functioned in a group. I would make my non-participant observers at the end summarize the academic learning, but also give me examples of some of the social skills we were focused on from their data. The social skills, good group members are not born. They've got to be made. So sometimes we need to teach the exact social skills. Oftentimes here we would use T-charts of what would this social skill look like, what would it sound like. If you go to my website on cooperative group learning, there are a variety of social skill lists, but sample lesson plans of how those social skills were taught. And the last part relates to some of the teacher decisions about how to promote the best face-to-face interaction. The research would say your best grouping is heterogeneous mixed ability, and for the most part, students shouldn't choose who they're going to work with because like chooses like, and the research says in the mixed ability, differentiated groups, you get better outcomes. I also include in your handout on pages 22 and 23 some quick cooperative structures that can be used to increase student-to-student discourse. Many of them Kagan Kagan-esque strategies. Strategy number 5 from Marzano and the other meta-analyses is the use of graphic organizers and other non-linguistic representations of information, primarily because the vast majority of learners today are visual learners. When I went to school, 40 to 45% of us were auditory learners. Today, less than 20% of the students in front of us are auditory learners. So we need those visual representations, the graphic organizers, the Prezi presentations, PowerPoint, Keynote, whatever. Strategy number 4, in-class guided practice before we send students home to do independent practice. Practice does not make perfect, practice makes permanent. Send them home to practice error. You firm up error and decrease motivation. A reason why many people have moved over to that flipped classroom notion, right? So they've got the students looking at DVD, video footage, but when they're doing this kind of work, you can monitor them in terms of, are they really doing this? Do we need to differentiate? Strategy number 3, you've got to keep learners working to succeed. You've got to keep them motivated. Attribution theory says then you've got to reinforce effort and show them this effort is paying off. You're making progress, successive approximations, not just the outcome that we want at the end. Strategy number 2, summarizing note-taking frequently. In many classrooms, there's way too much teacher talk. So we're looking to, in any time, what do we do to increase student-to-student discourse? Because we know whoever does the talking does the learning. Whoever does the talking is making connection. So how do we facilitate that student-to-student discourse? All those quick cooperative structures that were on pages 22 and 23 give you opportunities to increase student-to-student discourse. In addition to that, in your handout, on page 24, I've given you some other strategies that you can use. Sentence starters that they finish. I was surprised to learn. I'm still wondering about. Reaction diagrams, etc. The old rule of thumb was that we want to stop in minutes, or rather, let me rephrase that. We do not want to exceed in minutes the age of our learners before we stop and have them do something, process with new information. So if I'm working with a 5-year-old, about every 5 minutes I want them having some conversation or doing something, telling a partner something, do the reaction diagram. If I work with 15-year-olds, the old rule was don't go beyond 15 minutes. When you work with people such as yourself, we stop about every 2 weeks. No, actually, adults, we were told, don't go more than 20 to 22 minutes. But some of the latest neurological research tells us, regardless of age of learners, don't go beyond 5 to 7 minutes before you have them doing something with new learning. Number 1, the most powerful instructional strategy, the ability to identify similarities and differences, to compare and contrast, to classify, to categorize. Why? The greatest predictor of academic success is the ability to transfer old knowledge into a new situation. If we can firm up what it is as well as what it isn't, they're better able to transfer that information. So in terms of those guiding questions I started with, which of these practices are you routinely using? You feel validated because you're using them. Which could you think about what you're doing and tweak it a bit so you could use them? And are there others where you're like, well, I need to start doing this, or I need to learn more about this? The references that I had at the beginning, these are the people who do detailing great ways, different ways teachers can use those strategies. When I look at the list of 9, I begin to think some of them create the environment for learning. Some of them help our students develop understanding. And some of them help the students to apply knowledge and also extend their learning. And in thinking about that, I was pleased when I came across this visual from McCrell. That our clarity of stating our objectives, providing feedback, reinforcing effort, providing recognition and working together cooperatively. McGrail says every class has to have moments where they're cooperatively working. And then there are practices that help them develop their understanding and apply and extend knowledge. So, when we think about the processes of learning, again, we can use multiple intelligences, we can integrate the arts, etc. I'm going to move to that fourth column on our process differentiation menu. We had the instructional formats, the instructional arrangements. This was about instructional strategies. And I was really thrilled to listen to and learn about the work that you're doing with restorative practices. And so, when we think about that social and, oops, that's right, I reordered these, so never mind. We'll hold that thought, we'll come there. How many of you are familiar with this RTI pyramid? All right, so in California, we call it RTI squared, response to instruction and intervention. And there are two sides to that pyramid. One side is academic, the other is behavior. So we're trying to strengthen tier one, that's the core. And the stronger we make our core by using all these various strategies and techniques, the less students will need something in addition to. There will be a percentage of students, perhaps 10 to 15%, that might need something in addition to tier one core. So they get supplemental assistance. And there's a smaller percentage of 1 to 5% who might need something in addition to tier two. They would get intensive support. And again, that could apply to the academics or the behavioral side. So I want to take a moment and review something that I used with some of you folks in prior trainings, because I think it's one of the more practical tools that you can take away and apply. People use this as individual teachers. They use it sometimes as co-teachers. People use it at grade level meetings, team meetings, if they have student assistance teams, RTI processing meetings, right? You can use it in a variety of places. But it really relies upon having the complete set of data that you need. So when I often go into a school, people will say to me, oh, so you're that consultant. What do you do about it? And then they tell me about a kid. And when they finish, I've been looking at them, smiling, nodding my head. And when they finish, I usually say, I don't know. And they still hire me. Actually, I want to be helpful, but I can't based on the information they're giving me. If they're talking to me about a learner, what are they telling me about the learner? Are they celebrating this child's strengths? No. They're telling me about something they perceive to be a challenge, a deficit, if you will, within the child. Whether it's academic, behavior, communication, socialization, English language learning, movement, or a combination. It's all about, kid cannot do this, 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 what do we do? I don't know. It's way too abstract. I don't have the information to begin to problem solve. I need them to back up and first tell me how this child is smart. You never need to know how smart a child is to teach them, but you do need to understand how are they smart. What are their learning preferences? How do they learn? The more challenging you find a child, the more important the strength-based information becomes. For some students, I've got to get to important relationships, hobbies, interests. So when all the other things we're doing do not work, and we still have learners who struggle, maybe this process can help us figure out what to do. But it isn't just about the child. It is about a complex, dynamic interaction between the child and the environment. We might have put a lot of work into designing this environment, but it isn't successful for this learner. So we've got to look at what are we doing? What are the content demands of my class? What are the product demands of my class? What are the process demands of my class? And I have to compare the facts about the student to the facts about the classroom. And when I do that, I'm going to discover that there are some mismatches. This is never about good kid, bad kid, nor is it about good teacher, bad teacher. It's simply saying, given these facts about Rich and these facts about the classroom demands, we have mismatches. We typically use, as you'll see on page 32 of your hymnal, a 4-column format for this. Column 1 is facts about our learner. Column 2 is facts about the classroom demands. The third column is where we put our mismatches. Once we've identified all of our mismatches, we move to the fourth column and we brainstorm. And we are challenged every time to come up with a minimum of 3 to 5 possible solutions for every mismatch. So let's practice this a little bit. And for this, I've selected Alexi. You're meeting him as a 4th grader. He's a visual learner. He's very eager to please the adults. He's got quite a bit of interest in plants and animals. He's musical, he's social, he's athletic. He arrived from Honduras about 3 years ago. He is an English learner. He reads a couple of years below grade level. And since moving to California, he is very, very preoccupied about earthquakes. He's reluctant to participate in class. He really wants to have more friends. He's easily embarrassed. He appears to be daydreaming. Turn to a partner and see if you can discover his strengths. What strengths does this child have? And finish up that thought. Hands, please. Wait to be called upon. Exhaust his strengths. Keep your hand in the air until all the strengths you can see are gone. Does anyone see strengths? It's a small percentage of you. Okay, we're way back up there. You, yes, you. Tell me one strength.
He's a visual learner.
Okay, visual. Tell me another one.
Musical.
Musical. Tell me another one.
Social.
He's social.
Athletic.
Athletic.
He came from somewhere that may be unfamiliar to people.
So he comes from a different culture and might have experiences that may be of interest to others, yes.
He has imagination. He's daydreaming.
He has imagination, he's daydreaming. I want to come back to that. Anybody see any other strengths that haven't been mentioned? Yes. Okay, I got the interest in plants and animals, and then my old ears failed me.
And also earthquakes, which are science related, which can help.
Okay, he's in the science class, and his fear of earthquakes could relate to some of the stuff that we're going to be talking about. Any other strengths? Yes? Okay, he can read. He's a couple of years below grade level, but he can read. Way over there.
He wants to connect kids to small groups.
Okay, I appreciate the strength, and here's, if you're using this process, you've got to resist solving a problem or brainstorming a solution at this point, okay? So, but the strength is that he is social, A, and B, he desires more friends than what he has right now. He's social, but he's got a limited social network. So, when we do this for real, the best way we suggest it be done is that this data is collected before we meet. So if a child has a case manager or a service coordinator, they typically do that first column. If not, it's the teacher. The second column is delineated by the classroom teacher. And if that's co-taught, they do it together. Sometimes people invite someone in to help observe and help them do that. Schools where we have done this and it's been most successful, the norm is the data's completed before the meeting, we all review it before the meeting. And then we do just what we did. What are the strengths? Because our tendency is to go to perceived deficit and to ignore those strengths. But then we need some information about our classroom. So it's 4th grade, and they primarily are using a textbook. What are they studying? Sources of fuels, renewable, non-renewable fuels, the consequences of using fuels, actions humans can take to reduce hazards. What are they asked to do to produce so that we can see what they know? Well, they're asked to take notes. They get graded on class participation, their weekly quizzes, unit tests. Some of the bigger projects for them, they have to compare and contrast hazards and human actions to reduce hazards. They have to do an independent written analysis of sources of fuels and the consequences of their use. Process, a lot of teacher talk, occasional use of video. Volunteers are the ones who answer the questions, and they use a little bit some of those quick cooperative structures, think, pair, share kinds of things. Do you see mismatches between the facts about Alexi and the content process product demands of this classroom? Okay, raise your hand and tell me a mismatch that you see. Yes?
He's a visual learner, yet the process is mostly lecture.
Okay, he's a visual learner and it's predominantly lecture. This isn't about good kid, bad kid, good teacher, bad teacher. It's just a fact that creates a mismatch. Anybody else see a mismatch?
The primary source of information is a 4th grade textbook, yet he is 2 years below grade level.
All right, primary source of information is the 4th grade textbook, and he reads at a lower reading level. Yes? Okay, it's only volunteers who answer questions, and he's shy and easily embarrassed, so he's not volunteering. Right? So, I'm thinking about time. So, normally we would try to identify as many mismatches as is possible. But that usually just takes us a minute or two if we've got this set of data. And then we move to brainstorm, where we want to come up with a minimum of 3 to 5 options per mismatch. If you are brainstorming, you have all the time, money, energy, resources in the universe, all the difficult people have moved away to Difficult People Island, and you cannot vote them off the island. So, if you're tired of sitting and you want to stand and talk and brainstorm, you can do that or do it in your seat. But just typically we give people 4 to 5 minutes. But why don't you see what you can come up with in 2 minutes? Any strength that this child has that is not being used is a potential mismatch, right? So, in what ways do we change this so you can participate, benefit, and make progress? In what ways can we use his strengths that are not being used? In what ways can we redesign this environment so he can be more successful? 2 minutes, go. finish up that thought. You can hear my voice. Clap one time. Thank you. Short period of time, 2 minutes, but that's because you're my advanced group. No. But in reality, we still don't give people more than 4 to 5 minutes to do this because they don't sustain the brainstorming. They start to basically create a unit plan about an idea, or they're providing the rationale, the reasoning for it. Creativity literature tells us that we want to create a long list of brainstormed ideas before we ever pick a solution. So even though it may seem counterintuitive, it is quantity versus quality. If you're worried about the quality, it stymies the generation. We typically give people 4 to 5 minutes and we ask them to come up with at least 16 ideas in that period of time. So I'm sure you came up with some great ideas. Let's just take a look for a second at what Alexi's real team came up with. They had a little more time than you. They had the 4 minutes. All right. So at the top, you see there the mismatch. Reading at a 2nd grade level, text at a 4th grade level. You picked up that. And then you've got a bit of a brainstorm from them as to what they might do. For that, they had 8 ideas. And you mentioned the musical. Music wasn't being used, so they had some ideas there. You also picked up, as they did, the visual learner, and it's predominantly lecture. He desires more friends. You got that one too. Limited socialization opportunity. We didn't get as a mismatch in the short time we were sampling, but the kinesthetic learner, there's limited movement. Reluctant to participate, participation is required. So in 4 minutes, these are their 26 ideas that they came up with. Are they going to do all 26? No, but now they will pick and choose from this list. I cannot tell you how many times teachers have said to me that if you go to a meeting and you do this, they walk out the door with something to do the next day. When I was a district administrator in a school district in Vermont, this is how we began every faculty meeting, elementary, middle, and high school. Teacher would come in and say, I have a student, here are the facts about the child, here's what I currently do. I know it's not going to work, but I'm kind of stuck. We would put people in groups of 3 to 5 and have them brainstorm for 5 minutes, and on average we gave that teacher over 200 possible ideas to pick and choose from. I know it's not as good as the first 5 minutes of your faculty meetings. Right? So, I wanted to review that with a different learner than we've ever used in here because it tends to be such a valuable process. When we were talking about instructional strategies, I also wanted to make sure that you were in the dark. No, I wanted to make sure if you are unaware of this site that you are no longer unaware of it. The What Works Clearinghouse website. You'll get additional strategies. They meet the criteria for research evidence that the U.S. Office of Education says we need for quality practices in our work. So I was going to go into the 4th dimension of process, social and physical environment, but I know you've got a pretty good handle on this with all your work with restorative practices. So we are going to move to the 5th and final dimension of process differentiation, which is about co-teaching. How many people in this room, however you define co-teaching, would say that you have co-taught? You are now or you have in the past with another person? Beautiful, beautiful. How many of you think co-teaching may become a part of your future? Oh, are you smart? Okay. There is information in your packet on pages 27 through 30 related to co-teaching. We define co-teaching as 2 or more people who share responsibility for teaching all the students assigned to a classroom. Who is a co-teacher? The most predominant co-teaching partnerships tend to be of a general education teacher and a special education teacher. But many interventionists can co-teach. We have places where General educators are co-teaching with English language learning specialists, people who work with students who are identified as gifted and talented, where related service personnel like speech language pathologists are co-teaching, where paraeducators co-teach, and I believe where kids co-teach. We have high schools that we have worked with where we have up to 50 high school students who take a 3-credit elective course in co-teaching, and then we pair them with teachers across grades 9 through 12. Phenomenal resource that is oftentimes underutilized. In your packet, I provided you with some information about the 4 predominant approaches to co-teaching. All 4 have a time and a place. All 4 have unique features that differentiate them from the others. And all 4 have cautions. And of course, if you're using them, we want to see you use and not abuse the particular practice. On my website, if you go to presentations and you go to co-teaching, there's a very detailed handout for you that gives you tools to help facilitate role clarification, communication, establishment of trust, ways to track your journey in using these different approaches. So supportive co-teaching is the one where many people begin with. So while I talk about it, let me put a clip on, but I'll take the sound down. The visual's worth a lot. Come here. Okay. Oops. Come here, you. So here are 2 teachers, and their supportive co-teaching has one in the lead and one is out and about supporting students or collecting data. At least what they're doing is a rotation of who's in lead and who's support. This is 5th grade, and this is just outside of Chicago.
And division fraction problems, and explain how I solve them. So on the count of 3, let's all read that together. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
I will write and solve multiplication and division.
Hello. Wanted to take that down.
Fraction problems and explain
So,
how I solve them.
many teachers start with
Nice
supportive
job, everybody was
co-teaching.
trying the objective.
If you
There
don't
is
have
a learner quality that we'd like to focus on during this lesson. So when we look at our 4 learner qualities,
That doesn't
self-directed learner, collaborative worker.
There. Oh, we just up the whole thing. Okay. Anyway, you got the sense of one's there and they switch. But in the supportive co-teaching, you don't have to stay stuck. One is always in lead and one isn't. But again, many people start here as they get to know one another, the children, the curriculum, and the routines. If people do not have common planning time, or they have it but don't hold it sacred for this, they typically end up stuck in supportive co-teaching. If you're introducing new content and remember the team doesn't have content mastery, well then it's logical they're not in lead at that moment. I will tell you though, out of all 4 approaches to co-teaching, this is the one that will have the least benefit, the least effect. I have that statewide co-teaching project that the Feds fund in Kansas. We just finished analyzing 700 classroom observations and co-taught classes across Kansas. And in terms of the use of a lot of the student-centered practices we were talking about, if it was just supportive, there was very limited use of those practices. If in that same class period you add on the 2nd, the 3rd, the 4th, the more co-teaching practices in place, the greater the use of student-centered practices. It's a synergy as people share skills. If you have an interventionist and a classroom teacher, you've got a master of content and a master of access based on what their training has been thus far. The second approach to co-teaching is parallel. And parallel co-teaching is the only one of the 4 approaches that is not large group instruction. So in parallel co-teaching, you each focus on a subset of the class at the same time. We wouldn't want you always to just work with that subset. So over time, we need to make sure all teachers work with all groups of students. We have to also make sure that those groups are not primarily homogeneous ability grouped, but are more often than not heterogeneous. The research would say if you primarily group children of low ability with other children of low ability in a gen ed classroom, You may actually depress achievement by as much as 23 percentile points. So in what ways can we reconfigure? Being part of a group is never a life sentence. Parallel is the one that allows you the opportunity for the greatest differentiation, right? The ability to collect data, to monitor students, to establish relationship with them in that small group. Complementary co-teaching is the one where they're both teaching the whole group, but one is still driving content, but the other does things to make it more accessible. So while I am teaching, perhaps this one is modeling, filling in a graphic organizer. They are pre-teaching idioms, figurative language, words for a word wall. They develop anchor charts. They provide additional examples, analogies, right? They ask questions to check student understanding. Anything that facilitates access. Again, who leads and who's in the complementary role can switch, and that would be the goal over time. Team co-teaching would be those moments when you are most equal in the same moment. Clean example, we want our students to work together as partners, so we model in a role play what that partnership activity should look like. That is team. If there is an experiment and I explain step 1 and you model it, but then you explain step 2 and I model it, so we're going back and forth between who's explaining, which is the content, and who's modeling, which is access, that would be team co-teaching. If I explain every step, you model every step, that would be complementary. The goal is not to do team co-teaching all the time. That wouldn't be the goal. The goal is to move in and out of all 4 of them, but with supportive being the least utilized. So, let me move us to a bit of closure. The job that you have is a difficult job. You know that. But nobody ever said it was going to be easy. So I want to share with you some stress-reducing strategies that may help you during changing chaos in education. You heard me say that I'm a Letterman fan, so let me do it like Letterman's list of 10. In the midst of changing chaos in education, try strategy number 10. Dance nude in front of your pets. And if you don't have any, go to a neighbor's house. Strategy 9, have a popcorn party and don't put the lid on the pop. Some people like to do 9 and 10 in combination. Don't burn anything important. Actually, strategy 8 is my favorite, and I have used this 3 times. I visit lots of schools. I'm in anywhere from 800 to 1,000 different classrooms a year. And most of the time, I have a really good time in school. But there were 3 occasions I was in a school where the environment was so toxic. I thought, Lord, what would it be like if I were a kid here? What would it be like if I had to work here? And at lunch, I had to get rid of my stress so I could work with them. I used strategy 8, it worked beautifully. At lunchtime, sit in a parked car with sunglasses on. Get a hairdryer, point it at passing cars. See if they slow down. I'm here to tell you they will slow down. Strategy number 7, you can practice it a little bit. Stare through the tines of your fork and pretend that it could be jail. Strategy 6. Think of your favorite episodes from I Love Lucy. What were they? Chocolates, grapes, beat about a Benjamin. Strategy number 5, go shopping, buy lots, sweating it, return it the next day. Strategy number 4, I want someone per building represented to do this week when you feel stressed. Page yourself over the intercom, don't disguise your voice. Strategy number 3, make up a language and ask for directions. Strategy 2, you might have to go on a field trip. Enjoy winter, stick your tongue on anything metal in a schoolyard. And strategy number 1, drive very fast to work in reverse. You know, we all know we want to create a future for our students that is more caring and effective. We'll never get to the future driving in reverse. If we keep looking in the rearview mirror, seeing everything the way it always has been, the past will be stuck in our eyes. We you need to stay focused on our destination. In terms of when we're talking about the future is up to you. But the futurist Benjamin reminds us that the future arrives ahead of schedule. So let me end with, this will tie to the video that your superintendent shared. Huh, no, it won't. How about that? That's good. Well, I guess you didn't need it. But anyway, I don't know where it went. I thought it was there this morning. That's your ticket out the door. What are the practices that you currently use that have been validated by the content of our time together? What is it that you're going to tweak that you're already doing? Oh, it's so close. If I just do this and try this. And what are some other things that you're going to learn more about or try or practice? One more time, please talk to a partner and just share for a minute related to those 3 outcomes. Finish up that thought. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thank you. And I want to thank you for the work that you do every day for the benefit of our children and youth. And I also want to thank you for giving me an opportunity to spend some time with you, and also thank the people in the past who I've been able to work with, but also visit classrooms and see the great things that you're doing. So good luck to you as you continue your work designing environments for student success.